There is no bigger motivator to a person than shame and embarrassment. Everyone at some point in their life has lied about something, whether that be about your background in a job interview, who your family is in order to seem cool, or just about why you were late. Lying is as easy and common as breathing. Lying itself seems dangerous and kind of cool. However, the immense amount of shame one feels when they are caught out in a lie can be severe. Think back to a time when you felt the most shame you've ever felt in your life, regardless of how serious the event was. Whether you were surrounded by your peers or were alone, dealing with the aftermath and the white-hot sensation of guilt and disgust that accompanies shame is otherworldly, and most people would do anything to avoid feeling it in their lives. Nothing feels worse, but from the outside, nothing appears to be wrong. The simple threat of shame, guilt, and embarrassment being placed on a person is enough for them to consider doing the otherwise unthinkable to avoid it. In the majority of cases, rational people become caught up in their own stress and fear of what might happen if their shameful action becomes public, though the outcome in the majority of situations will most likely be one of verbal argument or a loss of a friend for the time being. Something that everyone would agree is quite tame. The very idea of facing repercussions for one's actions becomes their personal specter. This becomes their personal demon, haunting them with the idea of what could possibly happen and how different and worse their life would be afterwards. The concept of them being called out and feeling shame for what they have done takes on a life of its own in their mind, and they feel that other, more rational approaches to problem solving, where their actions are put on display, are non-starters. And while to most, it seems like an overreaction, in their stress-addled minds, choosing to hurt another person feels a lot more doable than admitting to their own faults and, potentially, losing their perceived comfort. In cases we have already covered, the avoidance of shame has been a recurring theme in The Guilty Party. With Nancy Brophy, she didn't want to admit that she was unfulfilled in her marriage due to her lack of writing success, or that she had spent her husband's retirement funds on frivolous purchases. She felt ashamed of her jealousy and was spiteful towards him for all that he had done with his career. Instead of dealing with the repercussions of divorcing him to live the life she wrote about, Nancy opted to stage her husband's death and blame the homeless people in the area. In her mind, that was better than simply admitting any wrongdoing. Similarly, with Anthony Todd, he couldn't stand the idea of his friends and family knowing that he had spent years stealing from them, using his physical therapy practice as a front. And so when the FBI raided his office and informed him they were going to be prosecuting him in the new year, he thought killing his entire family just so he could frame his wife for both the murders and his malpractice would save his reputation. And of course, there is Chandler Halderson, who believed that admitting he lied about having a job and going to a community college for years to his mom and dad was harder than just killing them outright. Today's case is no different. When you listen, you will no doubt think to yourself, this didn't need to happen. Why didn't he just get a divorce? And though the answer doesn't make any more sense, it is the same reason as the other cases I just listed. He simply didn't want to deal with the shame and responsibility. Welcome back to another episode of Dreading. Today we're going to be covering the case of Christopher Coleman, a man who was so fearful of his lies and infidelity becoming public, he decided to terminate his entire family, while faking having a stalker. While there is a plethora of information on this case, the main source of information I am using is from an article written in 2011 named A Family Erased, The Chris Coleman Story by Jeanette Cooperman. Out of all the reporting on this case, that article is the most profound and in-depth, and I will link it below. This case was recommended by a number of our patrons, subscribers, and we even had someone close to the case reach out via email asking us to cover it. If there is a case you would like to see us go over in depth, leave your suggestion in the comments down below, or send us an email at dreading.official@gmail.com. Be warned, we have over 1,000 suggestions, and while it might take a while to get to yours, we will be working as quickly as possible. If you're interested in true crime content, consider supporting the channel via Patreon or simply subscribing. If you like this video, consider liking and sharing it, as YouTube tends to demonetize and suppress our content. With all of that said, let us begin. Christopher Coleman was born March 20th, 1977, and was the son of not one, but two Christian pastors, Ron and Connie Coleman, who raised him in the ways of the church. His parents took great pride in Chris. along with his two brothers, and sought to teach them right from wrong, the way most parents do. However, they were a bit concerned with how sensitive Chris seemed to be.
Tell me about Christopher growing up. What was he like?
Mom's joy, I don't know how else to say it. He was just a good boy, involved at church activities, always doing whatever was going on at church.
Christopher, just a good kid, good student, good athlete. Went in the Marine Corps right after he graduated.
His father would recall on one hunting trip, before Chris was in high school, they had caught a rabbit, and when he butchered it in front of his son, he was completely distraught. Ron and Connie sought to toughen their son up, although when asked about how they went about doing so, they refused to give any details, besides stating that what they did had worked. By the admission of his high school friends and teachers, Chris was incredibly reserved and insecure, stemming from his belief that he wasn't quite tough enough. In his mind, having and displaying certain emotions was seen as a weakness, and his inability to keep his emotional battles internal was a moral failure on his part. To this day, his parents talk about how sensitive and quiet he was, and cite the fact that he allegedly never swore in front of them long after adulthood. When Chris was in his last years of high school, he was approached by a recruiter for the United States Marine Corps and was immediately enamored with the idea of joining. For many around him, they believed him joining the Marines was a way to cement his masculinity and show the people in his peripheral just how tough he was, though the majority of people didn't really seem to care. But from the moment he joined the Marines, Chris felt like he found where he belonged, and it was there that he fell in love for the first time. In 1997, when Chris was 22, he met 21-year-old Sherry Ann Weiss. Sherry Ann was an MP in the U.S. Air Force, and they were both studying at the K-9 Training Center in San Antonio. Sherry Ann was described by her friends and family as an incredibly fun, playful, and carefree woman when she initially met Chris. She was excited to see where her life took her, and when she joined the Air Force, she thought it was just a stepping stone in her life. She was all about the journey, not the destination, and thought that the Air Force would provide her a chance to explore the world on her own terms. But upon meeting Chris, Sherry Ann was smitten. She thought he was cute and that his shyness was sweet, and they quickly started dating. Chris was incredibly reserved and cautious in the relationship, and Sherry took his innocence in stride. Like he had been throughout his life, he bottled up his emotions and was very rarely publicly affectionate with anyone, friends, family, or otherwise. This was one of his first long-term relationships, and he was new to almost everything. But affection, especially the kind that occurs between couples, was often shamed in the church. But Sherry was incredibly open about sharing her thoughts, feelings, and affections. She would hug her friends, hold hands with those close to her, and let the people around her know how she felt about them. To those who knew the couple, it seemed that Sherry brought out a different side of him, and that he was attracted to her because of how much she pushed his boundaries. She was exciting to him, and he viewed her as a jolt of energy in his life. However, just 3 months after meeting Chris Coleman and starting their relationship, she was pregnant with his child. For Sherry Ann, it was a turning point. She knew that if she was going to be a good mother, she was going to have to provide a stable and loving life for her child, and that meant settling down. She wanted to give their children a normal family life and wanted to fully commit to Chris. With that in mind, Sherry Ann made the decision to leave the Air Force, and after meeting Chris's family briefly and him introducing her as just a friend, the two were married. Despite them teaching that they should be loving and accepting of everyone, no matter their path in life, neither Connie nor Ron took a liking to Sherry, and Sherry was well aware of their disdain for her.
When he came back with Sherry, what did you think?
Surprise. I was surprised. I wasn't impressed one way or the other. She was just a little blonde-headed girl to me.
They also let Chris know their opinions of his wife, talking negatively about his spouse in his presence. In multiple interviews, Connie would state that she was not impressed upon meeting Sherry, citing that she was just a little blonde thing, nothing much to look at. She also impressed upon the fact that she didn't find Sherry to be too smart or interesting, and believed that Chris could do a lot better. Connie would imply that Sherry Ann, the 21-year-old, had pressured Chris into an ungodly relationship and wanted to trap him in a marriage for money. This was despite the fact that at the time, Sherry Ann had been making more money than Chris. Similarly, Ron would go on to say she was a worldly little girl, little short shorts, tattoo on her leg, not the person we thought he'd be with. These are their statements that they gave to multiple outlets following Sherry's murder, meaning that even in death, neither of these people could say one nice thing about their daughter-in-law and mother of their grandchildren, which is important to note because if this is what they are saying publicly after she was killed, they most likely said worse when she was alive. By Connie and Ron's determination, Sherry Ann was a sinful woman who had tricked their godly son into an unholy union and had seemingly gotten pregnant just to lock him down. But Sherry Ann was very much active in her own faith. She volunteered at a local church in St. Louis, where she and Chris worshiped. She organized trivia night fundraisers for the needy. And more than that, she was always willing to give away her money to someone she believed needed it more than her. She was the first to give the clothes off of her back and the money from her wallet to anyone in need, and she believed it was her family's calling to do the same. However, even if she wasn't a godly woman and didn't partake in their faith the same way, that still doesn't justify their treatment of her. Sherry Ann and Chris were polar opposites when they met. She was adventurous and wild, and he was incredibly reserved. She pushed him out of his comfort zone, and he loved her spontaneity. But that all changed when she got pregnant. She was still a spitfire, constantly cracking jokes with friends and family, but with motherhood, she relaxed into her life, wanting to make sure she was at her children's beck and call. She didn't push Chris the way she had before, and she wasn't as fun or exciting to him, and Chris began to resent her. Chris's friends and neighbors would recall Chris often complaining about the shotgun marriage and how he regretted ever pursuing her in the first place. Though she would try to be affectionate with him, Chris never reciprocated and would, according to what Sherry told her friends, only have sex with her if she was facing the other way. He would also tell her that not to assume that just because he was having sex with her, that meant he loved her. After the birth of their first son, Garrett, Chris left the Marines, though Chris would state he did so in order to support his family by getting a higher paying job. His father would go so far as to say that he would have stayed a Marine forever had it not been for, quote, Bill Clinton and Monica, and all that was a disappointment, whatever that means. Chris would then begin working for Joyce Myers as a bodyguard, and his life would never be the same after. Joyce Myers is many things: a multimillionaire, an author, a televangelist, business person, preacher, and teacher. She is also a friend of Connie and Ron Coleman, and when the couple informed her that their son had just left the Marines and needed a job to support his fledgling family, she was quick to hire him to work as her security. As a televangelist, Joyce made millions of dollars traveling the world giving sermons and talks for profit. She first rose to popularity in 1993, when her show Enjoying Everyday Life began airing on BET and WGN-TV in Chicago. Joyce quickly became one of the world's most popular preachers, and her success was compounded in 2002 when Hachette Book Group paid $10 million for the rights to her back catalog of books. However, like most televangelists, her motivation and morals have been called into question countless times, with most people finding her exorbitant lifestyle to be the antithesis of what the Bible preaches. Many people, both religious and non-religious, find her excessive spending on material possessions to be at the very least questionable. And in 2003, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch published a 4-part special report detailing her ridiculous spending habits as a way to show how hypocritical she was. The report states that she uses the ministry to pay for her $10 million corporate jet, her husband's $107,000 silver gray Mercedes sedan, her $2 million home, and houses worth another $2 million for her 4 children, and a $20 million headquarters furnished with $5.7 million worth of furniture, artwork, glassware, and the latest equipment and machinery, including a $30,000 round table, a $23,000 marble-topped antique commode, a $14,000 custom office bookcase, a $7,000 Stations of the Cross in Dresden porcelain, a $6,300 eagle sculpture on a pedestal, another eagle made of silver, bought for $5,000, and numerous paintings purchased for $1,000 to $4,000 each, and among many other expensive items. In response to comments and criticism about her wealth and the money she spends on material possessions, Joyce was quoted as saying, "You can be a businessman here in St. Louis and people think the more you have, the more wonderful it is. But if you're a preacher, then all of a sudden it becomes a problem, seeming not to understand that the same teachings she uses to condemn others can be used to criticize her and other televangelists who travel the world via private jet. Because of this strong divide, with people regularly criticizing her within the church as well as outside of it, Joyce travels with security everywhere she goes. She often receives threats on her life, with people stating that she is a charlatan and a thief, and these security positions come highly coveted, as they are slated to earn more than $100,000 per year. How Chris felt about his job seemed to change day to day. Sometimes he would brag about his positions, and how he would travel around the world, take in some of the most beautiful sights, all while protecting someone who, in his opinion, needed very little protection. In conversation with his neighbors and friends, Chris would joke about his job, saying it was 90% about keeping up a tough appearance, because if someone knew there was security on hand, they were less likely to do anything. But then other times, he would complain to anyone who would listen, saying that he worked to, quote, protect some millionaire lady I don't even like. Sherry, for what it's worth, was not a big fan of his position. After having their second child, Gavin, Sherry would ask Chris to stay home with the family more, which he would swiftly reject. Sherry thought that her kids would benefit from more time with their dad, and would often bring up the fact that they had both quit working for the Air Force and Marines, respectively, to give their kids a stable home life. Though he would go on to complain to neighbors and friends that it wasn't fair that he worked 90 hours a week traveling with Joyce, all the while Sherry got to sit at home, he would remain steadfast that he would never leave his job. He would go on to gripe that Sherry had it easy, and would stay home gleefully spending all their money on useless items, while he broke his back to pay for all their expenditures. However, factually, this is false. Sherry would donate time and money to multiple church-related projects, and was by no means frugal when it came to spending on the family, but the lengths to which Chris would complain about her were not rooted in fact. It appeared to many that Chris thought that all the money he earned was his and his alone, and didn't appreciate it being spent by anyone, even his own kids. His neighbors, friends, and colleagues, including Joyce herself, were well aware of Chris's marital troubles. Whenever he could, he made it a point to complain about his wife, how she was spending his money, and how he wanted to get a divorce, but seemed to believe, foolhardily, that divorcing Sherry would lead to him getting fired. Chris had begun to agree with his parents' assertion that Sherry was the cause of all of his issues, and had indeed gotten pregnant on purpose to trap him. He would repeatedly state that though he loved their kids, they got in the way of what he should be doing with his life, and he'd be happier without them. Sherry, for her part, was still in love with Chris, and felt that they just needed more time together so they could fall back in love. In her mind, the distance from his job and his parents consistently degrading her had taken a toll on them, but it wasn't completely unfixable. Because of Chris's near constant complaints, as well as Sherry reaching out for assistance in the church, Joyce would recommend the two go to couples counseling with a pastor she knew, and seemingly it was working. The counselor would report that Chris seemed to be putting in a real effort to repair his marriage, and that the couple seemed to be working through a lot of their problems. However, nothing could be further from the truth.
So, anyway, just wanted to say I love you, and as you can hear, what's funny is you are messaging me now, said, show me your picture, say I love my hair today. Look at you, you look so hot.
While Sherry was trying to save the marriage, Chris had already moved on, and he had moved on with a woman who was so remarkably similar to his wife. She was her former best friend, Tara Lentz. Tara and Sherry were best friends throughout high school, and Tara was as much of a firecracker as Sherry was. She hadn't settled down the way her friend had, and because of that, Chris saw her the same way he originally saw his wife, attractive, interesting, and free. Where Sherry Ann had gotten married and had children, Tara had gotten a job as a hostess at a gentleman's club and worked as a cocktail waitress at a dog track. She was independent, fun, and exciting to Chris, and when she showed up at one of Joyce's events in Florida on November 8, 2008, Chris began a full-scale affair with her. Sadly, it had been Sherry Ann who told her former best friend to attend the event that would inevitably spell the end of their marriage, and the end of her life. Sherry Ann told her friends and Chris that she was worried about Tara and wanted nothing more than her former friend to settle down. She thought Joyce's sermons could help her find God and get on the right path, but all that it seemed to do was push her best friend towards her husband. Chris immediately began fantasizing about his life with his wife's former best friend. On his phone and laptop, he kept a note of everything he knew about her and special moments in their relationship, titled Tara. This note included her birthday, height, eye color, shoe size, ring size, jean size, favorite flower, perfumes, likes and dislikes. It had the date the pair first had sex, as well as a list of Christmas gift ideas, which included a promise ring with a circular diamond or a diamond cross. Shockingly, despite the fact that Chris already had children, he would often complain to his friends and neighbors how they got in the way of his destiny. His note included what the pair planned to name their future child, Zoe Lynn Coleman. Likewise, it appeared the two had already started planning for their child, as Chris was tracking Tara's period as well. The relationship between Tara and Chris seemed to be born out of spite for Sherry Ann, as both Chris and Tara had their resentments towards her. However, it was very real for both of them. Almost immediately, the two started declaring their love for each other, and began talking about how different their lives would have been had they gotten together earlier. Chris would lament that he hated his life, except for when he got to see Tara, and whenever Joyce Meyer's ministries would travel, he would pay for Tara to join him.
Naked in my bathroom, getting cleaned up.
It's an X-rated video.
She is on the camera and being recorded.
Chris is supposed to be guarding his boss, televangelist Joyce Meyer in Hawaii, not letting his guard down with a naked woman in his hotel room.
Where are we?
We are in Hawaii.
Sweet daddy.
Being bad.
Bad?
Kinda bad. This is Tara, my own home video of naked Tara.
In a few short months, the couple had gone to Arizona and Hawaii, and had planned to take a cruise in the coming new year. Oddly enough, at the same time, Tara was also in a relationship with a man named Jesse, who she took a cruise with in December of 2008, and Sherry's own brother Mario had contacted Tara, and they had also begun to talk about pursuing a relationship, getting married, and having a baby. Chris's own brother Keith also sent her explicit photos, and it seemed that they had their own private flirtation happening. Whether Chris knew about her other romantic pursuits or not remains to be seen. Chris would talk openly about how he was no longer attracted to Sherry, that she was disgusting to him, and Tara would request that Chris send her proof that they weren't sleeping together and he was saving himself for her. Chris would do this in the form of taking unflattering pictures of Sherry Ann when she was sleeping, and discussing how truly disgusted he was of her body. Chris took countless photos and pictures with Tara when they were together, including naked videos of her walking around their hotel room and talking about what they had done. In the videos, they would talk about getting married and how they loved each other, and looked like any other couple. Likewise, when he was at home, he took a video of himself taking a shower while masturbating at Tara's request, professing his love for her and stating how much more he loved her than Sherry. In the video, he also stated that it was the wildest thing he had ever done, and she brought out the real him. He saved these videos on his phone and computer, and on one occasion, appeared to save one of the naked videos of Tara on his father's computer. Photos were also found on Keith, Chris's brother's computer, but whether Chris shared them or Tara did remains to be seen. Neither Ron nor Chris have commented as to how this happened, but it seemed that Chris's parents knew about the affair in some capacity, and despite them being pastors themselves, were supportive of their son's choice to sleep with someone outside of the marriage. In fact, in interviews with True Crime Daily and other outlets, Ron would go on to say this.
Tara was just meeting a need that Sherry at the time wasn't taken care of. And
But I don't understand.
well, I mean, every man's got his desires, and every man has to be respected. It's built into every man. If your wife doesn't respect you, then you're going to find respect someplace else.
So are you saying that Sherry was a bad wife?
Just at that short, brief time, she had stepped back from doing her job as a wife.
If by respect he means sex, and that Sherry was withholding sex, that is untrue, as multiple of her friends and her text messages would show that she was trying to rekindle their sex life for years at that point. She had bought lingerie, candles, and had tried to seduce him multiple times. However, it was Chris who didn't want to have sex with her. Moreover, Sherry was respectful of Chris and their marriage, and it was Chris who was the one cheating and disrespecting her every chance he got, albeit with the permission of his parents, as they continuously degraded her. Even now, it appears that Chris can do no wrong in his parents' eyes, even with what we are about to cover. When Chris was at home, he was in constant communication with Tara, and Sherry Ann knew something was wrong. When they began to do couples counseling, Sherry saw it as the way to save her marriage, but Chris viewed it almost like a performance. After a few sessions, she began to get clued in to Chris's real motive. According to Sherry's text messages to her friends and relatives, Chris would act remorseful about the state of their marriage in front of their counselor, and seemed like he wanted to put the work in. But the moment he would leave, he would ignore her and demean her. Chris was not only putting Tara in front of Sherry, but his kids as well. Sherry and the boys had been looking forward to a Disney World vacation in the coming months. Both boys were excited, as it was supposed to be a reward for them. But Chris decided, without telling Sherry or the boys, that the money for the vacation would be better spent on Tara. He canceled the vacation outright, and used all the money for it to book a cruise to the Virgin Islands. For Sherry, it was obvious that he was trying to appear repentant for the state of the marriage, so that it could appear that he really tried to fight for it. But he had already checked out. She would tell friends that his charade was all for his job with Joyce. That way, when he did get a divorce, he wouldn't be fired. She told multiple people that she believed there was someone else, and showed Tara's picture to one of her friends, asking, "Do you want to see the woman Chris is cheating on me with?" Sherry also told her friend that things with Chris had gotten so bad that he had physically assaulted her on 2 occasions. 1 month into his affair with Tara, on Christmas Day, Chris would tell Sherry that he wanted a divorce, and felt like the kids and her were holding him back from his destiny and God's plan for him. This was the first inference that he was also resentful towards Gavin and Garrett that she had told her friends about. Only 5 months later, Chris's dream would come true, in the most horrific of ways. Prior to his affair with Tara, Chris had already been done with his marriage. He was tired of Sherry Ann, he was tired of Garrett and Gavin, and most importantly, he was tired of the cost they placed on his life. He resented the fact that because of his family, he couldn't spend any of the money he had on himself, and he had begun to fantasize about what his life would be like if they had went away. To be clear, he didn't want to get a divorce, as he would still be required to pay spousal and child support. He just wanted them out of his life, but that was just a fantasy, until he began his relationship with Tara. The moment Chris consummated the affair with his wife's former best friend, he began to seriously think about how to get Sherry Ann, Garrett, and Gavin out of his life for good. Sherry Ann had made it clear she didn't want to divorce him, and her being friends with some of his co-workers complicated things more. Whatever happened to the family had to be tragic, and it had to point away from him. While working for Joyce Myers, Chris had seen her be threatened multiple times. Both religious and non-religious people took issue with her, given her wealth and hypocritical teachings, and Chris had read many of the death threats that had been sent to her as her head of security. They very rarely mounted to anything other than a letter, but after he began sleeping with Tara, Chris began to receive threats of his own. According to Joyce, this had never happened to any of her 900 other employees throughout her ministry. 5 days after sleeping with Tara for the first time, a stalker would begin emailing Joyce Myers, threatening to make Chris's ultimate fantasy come true and kill his family. On Friday, November 14th, 2008, this email was sent to Joyce from the account destroychris@gmail.com. Subject line: Chris's family, they're dead. I'm sure this will make it to someone in the company. If you jackasses are like any other company, this will be someone's account. Pass this on to Chris. Tell Joyce to stop preaching the bullshit or Chris's family will die. If I can't get to Joyce, then I will get to someone close to her, and if I can't get him, I will kill his wife and kids. I know Joyce's schedule, so then I know Chris's schedule. If Joyce doesn't quit preaching the bullshit, then they will die. During the Houston conference, I will kill them all as they sleep. If I don't hit there, then I will kill them during the Boo tour or the trip to India. I know where he lives, and I know they are alone. Fuck them all, and they will die soon. Tell that motherfucker next time, let me talk to Joyce. She needs to hear what I have to say, and now she will. There are many things wrong with this email, coming from an outside point of view. First, of course, is the fact that the person who is writing the email seems to be under the impression that the email is going to Joyce, and he tells her to send it to Chris, but then goes on to say that his problem is just with Joyce and not Chris, and wants Chris to relay the message to Joyce, or he will kill Chris's entire family. If the issue he has is with Joyce, he would be trying to get into contact with her and not Chris. Secondly, this is supposed to be a direct threat to Chris and to Joyce. However, it goes out of its way not to threaten either party. The person behind it is saying that they know Chris and Joyce's schedule, and they apparently hate them both so much they want to kill them to stop them from preaching. Or at least it will get Joyce to stop preaching, given that Chris just guards her. However, instead of saying they're going to stop them by killing them, threatening the events they are going to, or threatening the location the book signings are being held at, all which would hinder Joyce's ability to preach, this person somehow believes that killing other people will somehow make Joyce and Chris stop. It's nonsensical and adds too many variables to the equation. If you want to threaten someone, you simply threaten them. You don't say, I have a problem with you, so I'm going to kill your high school teacher. Moreover, you don't say, I have a problem with you, so I'm going to kill your high school teacher's family. There are too many degrees of separation for this threat to be logical. If you say you have an issue with Joyce, why not attack her family, or her loved ones, not the family of someone else who just works for her? But the ending of the letter seemed to imply that whoever the sender was someone who Chris had stopped from speaking to Joyce at an event. This mysterious and clearly delusional party was someone who would have been caught on camera trying to speak to her, or they would have had some record of being thrown out. Given how unhinged they were speaking, there was a high likelihood that Chris and other members of security would remember this person, but no such luck. Chris had no apparent recollection of who this person could be, and moreover, there was no video footage of this person to be found. But Chris took the threat against his family very seriously. He told everyone who would listen about the threat, and about how he had planned to install security cameras around his home to protect Sherry Ann and the kids. He told his neighbor from across the street, who just so happened to be a police officer, and he assured Chris that he would also keep an eye out. The threats persisted all the same, with multiple emails coming from the Destroy Chris Gmail account, like this one. Subject line, Houston death. Tell Chris his family is dead. I know his schedule and they will die. Next time that motherfucker will let me talk to Joyce. And this one. Subject line, fuck you all. I know you got my fucking email. You think I am full of shit. Just wait. I will shoot their asses with my .40, kill them all. I'm so sick of bitches. I am so sick of bitches like her taking everyone's cash so she can fly her jet and pamper her white ass. Fuck you all. Tell Chris I will kill them. He has no idea when, but it will happen. I'm sure you motherfuckers are putting your pussy-ass security team at the house or police. Whatever. I will kill them, then I am coming after Chris. Then you, Danny. Who the fuck is Danny? Then David. Who is David? I may not be able to get to Joyce, but I'll get the rest of you motherfuckers. Fuck you all. I know when you read these, just wait and see. Fuck you all. Tell that bitch, Joyce, to give my money back and talk to me, and this will stop. Until then, everyone will die, starting with Chris's wife and kids. I know his fucking schedule. Every time Joyce is gone, he is gone. You motherfuckers are probably wondering how I got your emails. You stupid fucks. Just like every company. So fucking predictable. Dumbasses. The threats continued to escalate in the following months, with one being placed in the mailbox of the family home. But Chris refused to take any leave of absence or quit his job to pursue another. Despite what he had claimed, the family had enough saved up to support a job search. And moreover, due to the threats, Sherry Ann knew people would step up to help if they needed it. But Chris refused, not wanting to bend to terroristic threats. However, 7 months after the threats began to pour in and Chris had started his affair, his ultimate fantasy would come true. According to Chris, on May 5th, 2009, he woke up early, as he always did, to go to the gym. Sherry Ann and him had an uncharacteristically good night together. They had fallen asleep in the same bed. He rolled over, kissed her, and left home at 5:45 a.m. According to his statement, she had been alive and well when he left. While he was at the gym, Chris texted Sherry to wake up and check on the boys, which was uncommon for him, as he had never texted her wake-up calls in their marriage prior to that day. He texted her a couple of times, then called her, but she didn't answer her phone. After not hearing from her for an hour, something that could have been explained by her simply sleeping in, Chris contacted his neighbor, Sergeant Justin Barlow, and asked him to go over and check on Sherry. He emphasized he was worried because of the threats the family had been receiving for months, and lied to Sergeant Barlow by telling him he always woke Sherry up like this, and her not responding meant that something was really wrong. Barlow went to check on the house, and upon finding a window unlatched with the screen removed, he called in for backup. Other officers arrived on the scene, and together they entered the home, and what they found was horrific. Apple red spray paint was found up and down the walls, writing disturbing messages. One wall had the word "punished" on it, while another said, "You have paid," and "fuck you, I am always watching." Every wall had a message on it, and as the police searched the home, they found the bodies of Chris's family in their beds. They had been strangled to death. Worse still was that after death, their bodies had been haphazardly covered with their blankets, and messages were spray painted on the sheets. 11-year-old Garrett had been directly painted on, and the sheet covering him had a circle on it, while 9-year-old Gavin's body was covered in a sheet bearing the message, "Fuck you." The word "bitch" had been spray painted around where Sherry was killed, and she had not been covered. She was found laying face down, naked on the bed she shared with her husband, and it appeared that she'd been beaten before she was strangled. It was apparent that the killer had wanted to embarrass and degrade her by leaving her uncovered. Immediately, the police closed the scene off as a crime scene, and due to the highly unusual circumstances, they called in for help from the major case unit. Before we continue, let's take a moment to talk about the crime scene and how unnatural it is. Of course, murder of any kind is unnatural, but so much of this particular crime scene stands out, feeling as if it had come out of a movie. It appeared that Joyce and Chris's stalker had broken into the home to kill Sherry Ann and the boys, as they had stated in their emails and threats. However, there was no sign of a break-in. When the cops arrived, there had been an unlocked window with the screen removed, but the screen was found in one piece, and as if it had been purposely removed for some reason. The police also noted that there were many other points of entry left open to the house, which struck them as unusual, given that Chris was a security guard. If Chris was as fearful of a stalker as he claimed to be, why had he left so many points of entry to the home open? Moreover, the killer, who, by their own admission, would have no ties to Sherry and the boys, but still decided to kill them in the most intimate way possible. Strangulation is one of the most personal methods of killing, as it takes a significant amount of time and expends a lot of energy. In crimes of passion, when the killer is wanting to deeply hurt the victim and has a lot of rage towards them in particular, we see that they often choose to strangle their victims so they can feel the life leave their bodies. Given that this killer was more upset with Joyce and Chris, and he had limited time on his hands, it would have made more sense for him to kill Sherry Ann and the kids with a knife or a gun. It should also be noted that Sherry Ann and the boys had a very limited window of time before being found. Each of their deaths would have taken at least 5 minutes to complete, with Sherry Ann's being significantly longer due to the beating she underwent. However, the killer had less than an hour to complete all of the murders and write his cruel, vindictive message on the walls. Given that Chris left the house, according to the security cameras across the street, at 5:45 a.m., and Justin Barlow and other police officers entered the house at 6:43 a.m. The police likewise noted that, according to the security cameras, no one else had entered the home after Chris had left that morning. So much of the story didn't make sense, and that was because it was all bullshit. There was never a stalker, there was no masked person seeking to harm Joyce by killing the family of her bodyguard. It had obviously been Chris, trying to set up a fall guy so he could kill his family and start a new life with his mistress. The issue was, Chris was a fucking idiot, whose only knowledge of crime came from movies and heavily dramatized police shows, so he believed a stalker who hangs out to write messages on children's dead bodies was totally believable. The amount of time, effort, and malice that would be necessary to complete such a task was notable and pointed directly towards him. At once, the police and the Major Crimes Unit knew something was odd. There was no way a stalker would have been able to carry out the crimes in the time frame that Chris had provided. Moreover, it didn't make sense that a stalker who wanted to kill Chris would wait for him to go to the gym before striking. Chris's reaction also didn't make sense. When he returned, Justin and other officers had already discussed how they were going to handle him at the scene. They believed, due in part to Justin's knowledge of Chris's past behavior, that he would try to get into the house to see his wife and kids. They had planned to have multiple officers available to hold him back. However, when he arrived, and they informed him that his family was dead, he barely reacted. Furthermore, multiple officers noted that Chris appeared to have scratch marks up and down his arm, consistent with if Sherry fought him off when he was trying to kill her. The following is from court documents, going over what happened after Chris was informed of his family's well-being. Jonathan Peters, a chaplain for the police department, was called to the scene to inform defendant his family had been killed. When he arrived on the scene, defendant was sitting in the driveway. He described defendant as stoic after he broke the news to defendant that his family had been killed, and said defendant was absolutely not hysterical. Peters accompanied defendant in the ambulance. During the drive, defendant looked down at his right arm and said, "How did those get there?" referring to some marks on his arm. Peters identified People's Exhibits 70 and 71 of pictures showing the marks on defendant's right arm. Peters testified he later saw defendant strike his right arm on the gurney in the ambulance, but there was no way the marks were caused by the gurney, as the marks were there prior to defendant striking the gurney. Peters recalled defendant having a similar conversation with Jerry Paul, Columbia's police captain, about the marks on his arm, and told Paul he did not know how he got the marks. Jerry Paul testified consistently with Peters that the blow to the gurney could not have caused the marks on defendant's arm. Paul described the marks as, quote, some scratches and some redness, with very preliminary bruising. When Paul asked defendant what happened to his arm, defendant said he did not know, and then abruptly changed the subject and started asking Paul other questions. The crime scene unit also immediately noted that there was one major aspect of Chris's story that could not be true, and that was when his family was killed. Again, according to Chris's story, Sherry Ann and he had a normal night together, and he had woken up at 5, kissed her, then left. She had been somewhat awake when he left the home, and everything, according to him, was fine. But due to the rate of decomposition and the temperature of her body, it was clear that Sherry Ann and the boys had been dead for hours by the time the police had arrived, meaning that by 5 a.m., when Chris was leaving for the gym, he would have definitely noticed that his wife was dead next to him. By the time Chris was questioned later that day, the police already knew portions of his story weren't adding up, and feared the worst. The following is a portion of a 5-hour-long police interview that was taken that morning. Unfortunately, there are a lot of cuts in the footage, which is why at times it will feel like it's edited strangely. The full interrogation has not been made public.
And you know what, for right now, I'm just going to have a seat there. I'm sure that's what I want to do, but... Here's another water if you need it, okay? I mean, obviously, we got an investigation to do, so I got to go over your Miranda rights, just because we're talking to you, we're talking to a lot of people, okay?
I've done it for myself.
Just, I'll tell you what, from the beginning, let's just start up from when you got up this morning until the time you pulled up at the house. Just kind of walk me through that first,
Okay.
and then we'll go through and kind of explain, talk about some different things as far as the emails you've been getting, okay?
Well, I set my alarm clock for 5:30, and I used my phone for my alarm clock. And got up at 5:30, went in the bathroom, put these clothes here I got on, and went to the bathroom. Basically, got in the truck and left, and drove off. I got to I don't know where I was at, but called Sherry to wake her up, get her going, and she didn't answer, of course. And so I went on to the gym, to Gold's Gym, over by Ronnie's Plaza in South County, and started working out. I text her at some point. I might even have called her again. I don't remember. I could probably look at my phone if you want me to.
Do you guys have a home phone number too, or just cell phones?
We just use cell phones. So I text her, and then she still didn't respond, and probably now it had to have been well after 6 o'clock sometime when I texted her or called her. I'm sure it's still on her phone what time it was. Okay. And she didn't respond. It's not like her, because the kids should have been up and stuff, or getting up and going by then, I believe. And so I called her again. called her again on the way back, or when I was getting ready to leave, and she didn't respond again, and I started getting a little concerned because it's not like her not to answer the phone. Sometimes she won't answer if she's in the shower, but she always calls me back right away. And so she didn't do that at all, and so that's when I called you.
And so what time did you text her back? The second time?
I can tell you.
6:23. So at 6:23 a.m. is when you first texted her this morning. It says, "Hey baby, are you awake?" Does that sound right?
Had you tried to call before that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I can pull up the call log too if you want me to.
Okay, that just does text. I'm sorry. All right, so you're just looking at text. And how are those out, Justin? Did you go to?
So the first one is from you. It says, "Hey baby, are you
6:23. I'm sorry.
6:23 a.m. And then and she doesn't respond to you, correct?
It would be on there.
Oh, right. Okay. And so the second one for you says, "I know he was tired last night." 6:23 says, "I have about 5 minutes left on cardio, then I'll be home." And she never responded to any of them because I could tell. Yeah, I could tell on the phone.
Okay.
And then at 7:27 it says, "Hello, you up?"
7:27.
I'm sorry, 6:27. 6:27. And then at the same time, at 6:27, another one goes out and says, "Time to get the kids up."
Chris keeps emphasizing that it's not like Sherry to not text him back with updates. However, it wasn't like him to text her at all. Once more, Chris, not Sherry, was the one acting unusual that morning. Moreover, his willingness to share his phone with the police could be seen as him trying to be helpful because he is innocent. However, he is woefully inept and doesn't realize that simply having the police clone his phone would allow them insight to his long-standing affair with Tara, not to mention the multiple naked photos and videos he had of her on his phone, or the video he had made masturbating in the shower while saying he loved her more than Sherry. At one point, Chris asked the officer if he could be given a blanket or a sweatshirt because he was cold. However, it should be noted that it was the beginning of May, and the interrogation room, according to the officers, was incredibly warm. Chris only really used the blanket to cover his arms, in an attempt to cover the scratches that Sherry had left on his arms. According to court documents, at one point during the interview, officers walked out of the room and defendant picked up one of the officers' notes and looked at them, seemingly to assess how they felt about his story.
Anything as far as that sticks out in your mind from this morning? I mean, when you left, did you notice anything?
No. The only thing I told somebody was, the only thing I can remember is having to slow down for a car backing out of the driveway. That's it.
From the which driveway were they backing out of?
I don't know. He asked me the same thing. It was like 3 or 4 up. I don't know. On the left-hand side. That's the only thing I remember.
Chris says here that all he saw that morning that stood out to him was a car that he slowed down for as he backed out of the driveway to go to the gym. However, according to security footage, that never happened. By this point, Chris had handed over his cell phone and the police had found evidence of his affair with Tara. Likewise, the police, still at his home, were going through his laptop and found more evidence there, showing that he had a motive to want to be rid of his wife and family. That, along with the fact that they had died much earlier than Chris had claimed, made them believe they were looking at the killer, at which point they turned up the pressure.
Want to say anything about the car?
It was just a darker color. The only thing I'm sorry, I should have been more observant.
I mean, anything that sticks out? I mean, were you able to tell him like what kind of car it was? I mean, did you recognize it in the neighborhood at all? Or?
No, I was just backing out of the driveway. I didn't even see.
Those, kind of going back to when you first came here back in November last year, you were getting some of those emails sent to your work email address, right? Do you still have those on your computer?
I can look.
Okay.
They might be on the server. Even.
Okay.
I doubt if they're on the computer because it deletes them after so long.
Kind of purges them out, type of thing.
But I would think they do on the server.
And how many threats like that? I mean, up until November, have you ever gotten threats like that before?
No, people have been upset with me, but I haven't gotten anything. I mean, I've had people yell at me and cuss at me and everything else, but, you know, and that's sort of off the property and all that stuff, you know. If I just been there this morning, I'd leave.
What we're gonna do, you know, Chris, we're gonna get past that. Okay, we're gonna We're gonna work this out and get through it, all right? Do you have any paint at your house?
I think so.
No, don't.
I don't think so.
Okay. Any spray paint?
If I do, it's old. We kind of talked about the divorce a little bit.
This last December?
Yeah.
Really?
And I went to Joyce with it, told her about it, or Danny, I can't remember which one. And they knew about it, and they suggested that we meet with somebody and see if we could work out whatever it was. And really all it was just communication, not communicating very well. And so...
Did you meet with somebody?
Yeah, Mike Shepard, the guy that's here downstairs in the lobby.
Okay.
He's and we've been meeting with him pretty regularly, and things have been going pretty awesome.
How often do you meet with him? I mean, you said regularly.
He travels overseas a lot too, and so as often as me and him schedule, I'd say on average maybe once a week.
We've got when you left the house this morning, was your wife alive?
Oh yeah.
What would you say if I told you that I don't think she was?
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think she was.
Notice he says, I think she was. Not that she was. She was and we talked. She definitely was alive, and here's why I know. Just timid, I think she was. If you had spoken with your wife the morning she was killed, you would be dead set on the fact that that had occurred. However, his timid response, as if he's unsure of what he does and doesn't know, points to him trying to account for what evidence they have against him. Many people who are caught in lies will do this. When they are deliberately called out, but the proof against them hasn't been made available to them, they won't fully backtrack on their statements outright, because they know that will make them look worse. But their minds will race, trying to come up with a reason why they could be wrong. At this point, Chris's mind will be in a panic, and every new assertion and statement from the police will just add to his stress. Chris will begin to do more self-soothing actions, like rubbing his arms, playing with his hands, and rubbing his knees.
And she was.
Okay.
She was laying right beside me.
Right. And I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that you were there, and I'm not doubting that you care. But I am doubting that she was alive when you left this morning. Physically, what we have are different ways to tell how long a person's been deceased. Mm-hmm. That was done. And what do you think that showed?
I don't know. I guess the time frame when I was gone. I mean...
No, you guys wrong. Chris, we need to get this resolved, okay? That you can't argue with physical evidence.
Right. I'm not trying to argue with it.
All right. What I'm telling you is there is no other explanation. There's no other reason that the information we have would support what you're telling us. That it can't. It can't. You've told us a story and we've gone over it numerous times. Right. You know what? We walk out to Justin, maybe we missed this. Let's go in and talk to him about this and just make sure that we're not missing something. Let's give him every opportunity to tell us exactly what happened and maybe we're missing something. Right. So that's why we go out and we come back in, and we go out and we come back in. Right. I did have to use the restroom, that was legitimate, but we go out and we come back in. And we felt very comfortable that we were giving you every opportunity to tell us something that was going to contradict the information that we had. Mm-hmm. All right, we've got this information, you're saying it, and we're giving you opportunity to give us something contrary to what you told us before, so that, okay, yeah, all right, that would make sense. That hasn't happened. That hasn't happened. Listen, man, she wasn't alive when you left.
She was alive. She was laying right beside me.
Chris is now saying she was alive. She was laying right beside me, which means to imply that he simply didn't notice she had been killed, if she did indeed die before he left the house. In his original statements, he said he kissed her and said goodbye, and she was responsive. But now he is trying to backtrack to make it seem as if he could not have noticed his wife was dead next to him, despite her being badly beaten and strangled. If Chris wanted to use this argument, an easy follow-up question for the police would be, how did he, a professional security guard, not wake up when his wife was being attacked and strangled in the bed next to him? Why did a stalker who wanted to kill you not choose to just kill you?
We can go back and forth with this all day long, but the
physical evidence doesn't lie, man. She was not alive when you left this morning. The children weren't alive when we left this morning.
Yes, they were.
No, come on, Chris.
They
We gotta get over this. Now there's reasons, and that's the point we're at. I wanna hear the reasons. Now is when we need to find out what happened, man. It's so important. You're at a great point to be able to help us to try to figure this out. We already know what happened. We need to know why it happened.
I know what to tell you.
Listen, no, you do know what to tell us.
No, I don't.
Come on, Chris. She was not alive when you left. The children were not alive when you left. You know that's true, and I know that's true.
No, it just...
We need to clear this up now. We need to clear it up now. Did something happen? What happened?
Nothing happened.
What was going on in your life, Chris? Because I can't buy what you're saying. The physical evidence does not lie, Chris. It does not. She was not alive when you left, period. The physical evidence does not lie, man.
What do you want me to tell you?
The truth.
I'm telling you the truth.
How did we get to this point? That's what I need to know. I need to know how and why we got to the point we're at right now. We both know you're not telling me the truth. We both know that. I've done this a long time. I'm looking into your eyes, and I can tell you you're not being truthful, Chris. We need an answer. There are answers. As bad as this sounds, as bad as this looks, or you may think it looks, we understand, and I've talked to many people who have given me reasons, and it's like, you know what, okay, all right, I can understand how somebody might have been feeling that at that time. And maybe they acted on it, and they shouldn't have, and they regret it. There's no way to turn clocks back. You can't turn clocks back. You understand that, don't you?
Right.
You can't turn the clock back. The only thing we can do is go forward from this point, and we need to know what and why it happened. Come on, Chris, help me out with this.
I'm telling you, I've already told you. I've told everybody. I told the guy in the ambulance. I told you. I told him.
The more we go back like this, the more it makes me think that there maybe even isn't a good explanation for it. I mean, we need to know what happened. We can't keep going on this. It didn't, she was alive when I left. We know that's not true, and there's nothing we can do about changing that. If we know she wasn't alive when you left this morning, there's got to be an explanation. Now is the time to tell us. Now is the time to get this out in the open.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Yes, you do. Yes,
No.
you do. You have to tell me the truth, Chris.
I'm telling you the truth.
Were you involved in her death?
No.
Okay. Was someone you know involved in her death?
I don't know.
Did you know? Did you talk to anybody about arranging her death?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
The footage has not been made public, but when Chris was asked about if he was having an affair or not, Chris outright denied it, saying that he was in love with his wife, and that the counseling they were going to through their church was working. He stated that they were working through all of their issues, and it was a tragedy that this had to happen right when their lives were set to get better. However, during the interview, the police let Chris know that after searching his phone, they had made contact with Tara, and that she was being interviewed at the same time. He then admitted that he, quote, said some things he shouldn't have to her, and downplayed the intensity of their relationship. And while it seems as if Tara had no way of knowing what Chris was going to do, she didn't exactly have an issue with what had happened. The following clips are from Tara's interviews as they were showcased on Crime Watch Daily.
How long have you been in a relationship with Chris?
Since late November, early December.
Where all of you guys been together?
Phoenix and Hawaii, Maui.
What would you tell his wife when he was gone?
He would have just told that he was working.
So Sherry was not aware of the affair that you and him were having?
No. I know she suspected, but...
In this first of 3 interviews with police, Tara reveals that she had become possessive of her married lover.
You know, he always would take pictures when he was going to sleep to prove that, he wasn't sleeping with her or anything.
See, now to us, he tried to paint that it was a rosy, perfect marriage.
No. They never kissed. Never hugged.
Then right in the middle of the interview, the poker room waitress calls her boss.
It's Tara. Hey, no, I'm in the middle of a really high-profile murder investigation. I've got a murder investigation. I'm right in the middle of it. I have 4 detectives here sitting at my house. They have no problem giving you proof or anything like that. I thought I was coming into work today.
Her job secure, Tara continues revealing the salacious details of their scandalous affair.
But you had even registered on some wedding sites and stuff, looked at some rings.
I looked at stuff. But, with his job, he can't be living with anybody unless he's married.
Had you guys ever talked about having children together?
Mm-hmm.
Did he send you some type of message shortly after all this happened, after he come home and discovered all this?
He texted me.
What was the message from there?
From then? Call you when I can. I'm all right.
Tara then reveals Chris texted her only moments ago. Apparently, he was right in the middle of his interrogation.
I got a text. I know. You know that. He texted me. I just thought I'd tell you.
He just texted us, yeah.
What do you want now?
Just said he was thinking about me and that the wake was at 3.
Was telling you anything about these, or that he was planning anything like this?
Absolutely
Did
not.
you have any knowledge of these homicides whatsoever?
No knowledge.
Before,
So,
like it or not, unfortunately, your name is Tara Motive.
Exactly.
The full interviews have not been made public. When Tara was told what happened, she maintained her innocence, but was incredibly open about the relationship she had with Chris. The following is a court record of what she stated in her interview. During the interview, she revealed, inter alia, that defendant told her he planned to serve divorce papers on Sherry on May 5th, 2009, that she and defendant planned to go on a Caribbean cruise on June 14th, 2009, and that they planned a tentative wedding date of January 2010. Tara also told investigators that she had been looking at engagement rings, registering on wedding registration websites, and looking for homes in the St. Louis area for her and defendant to live in upon their marriage, and that they have discussed baby names. Tara testified she communicated consistently with defendant between November 2008 and May 2009, during which both professed their love for each other. Tara testified she stayed in defendant's hotel rooms and had sex with him during these trips. Tara testified she and defendant planned on getting married after he divorced Sherry. The plan was for Tara to move to Illinois. Tara testified that she and defendant got matching promise rings. Defendant told Tara he talked to an attorney about getting a divorce. The divorce papers were being prepared. He was scheduled to pick up the papers from the lawyer on Monday, May 4th, 2009, and he was going to give them to Sherry and ask for a divorce. Defendant did not give Sherry divorce papers on May 4th as planned, explaining to Tara he was unable to do so because Sherry's name was spelled incorrectly. He said he asked that the attorney correct the typo and the papers would be ready to be picked up on May 5th, 2009, meaning that the day Chris's entire family would die in a horrific fashion, he had actually been planning to file for divorce. But that is not all. As we asserted previously, due to the naked photos of Tara being found on Chris's father's computer, his parents not only knew about the affair, but were supportive of it due to their negative feelings towards their daughter-in-law. The day that Sherry Ann, Garrett, and Gavin were all killed, when Chris was talking to the police, Tara was notified of what happened, not by the police or Sherry Ann's family, as they were friends, but by Ron Coleman. How did he know to contact his son's mistress or know of her existence prior to that day? He refuses to say. Chris has gone on to state that he told his dad to call Tara, but again, how he got her number in the relationship he believed Tara had to Chris previously remains to be seen. That same day, while Chris and Tara were being interrogated, Chris would actually text Tara saying he was alright. She would then show the police in the interview text, which they would verify as coming from his phone. So his continued insistence that their relationship wasn't serious, that he still loved his wife, and he didn't want to be with Tara, was obviously false. Tara seemed flippant throughout the interviews. She didn't care that her friend from high school had died. She didn't appear to have any emotional reaction. She just seemed to think it was all mildly amusing, if anything. But it wouldn't be until the trial that her and Chris's true nature would shine through. Shortly after the murders, Chris was arrested 3 counts of first-degree murder. Sherry's family then filed a wrongful death suit against him, meaning that he would be unable to liquidate any of the shared assets he had, like the family home or Sherry's possessions. And it was at the trial that the majority of evidence against Chris would become public. After investigating the threats that were being sent to him and his family by an unknown stalker, it was found that they had been sent from his laptop computer, which he would go on to admit was only used by him. Moreover, the time of death for Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin was placed at 3 to 5 a.m., meaning that when Chris left for his workout, his family had already perished. So, either Chris didn't notice his wife had been killed, and the word bitch had been spray painted all over the place, and his stalker chose not to kill him, despite saying he wanted to, or he had just done it himself. The investigation also found that the red spray paint that had been used to write more threatening messages in the house had been purchased 3 months prior to the murders by Chris. Though Chris's father would go on to claim he was trying to leave Tara to be a better husband to Sherry, Sherry had told multiple of her friends that if anything happened to her or her family, it was Chris. The cacophony of Chris's lies had begun to unfurl. Joyce Myers was deposed for the trial, and she stated that while she employed men and women who had gotten divorced previously, and that was a non-issue, that had she known about Chris's adultery, he would have been fired outright, especially given that he had done so while on tour with her. And seeing as that would have been made public during the divorce hearing, given that Sherry knew about it, Chris didn't want to lose his job. But one of the most damning pieces of evidence was something that almost went unnoticed, and was so simple that many people overlooked it entirely. In multiple of the stalking messages and on one of the spray-painted walls, the word opportunity was misspelled, and in every single message that Chris had ever written using the word, it was misspelled the same way. Chris maintained his innocence throughout the trial, and his parents vehemently defended him. They blamed Sherry for Chris's cheating, saying that she wasn't a good wife and didn't take care of Chris in the marriage, so he simply had to cheat with her best friend. They hand-waved Chris's buying of the spray paint that was used to graffiti the walls, saying that he bought it for probably some other reason, and whoever did kill Sherry and the kids just happened upon it that day and thought that the message would be a fun addition. And as for Sherry and the kids being killed the same day Chris told Tara he would be leaving his wife, it was just a coincidence. They tried to hammer home that the evidence against Chris was circumstantial at best, and stated outright that the DNA evidence that was found under Sherry's fingernails didn't match Chris. But that's not quite true. When Sherry's fingernails were scraped, the DNA was compared to Chris's. However, the results were inconclusive. It matched, but there wasn't enough of a DNA profile to say outright that it was Chris 100%. Rather, it would be more accurate to say there was a high likelihood it was Chris, and if it wasn't him directly, it was someone in his immediate family. However, despite the defense trying to argue that Chris and Tara's affair was over, and that he was planning on leaving her to be with his wife, Tara took the stand and was seen wearing the promise ring that Chris had bought for her. She testified to the relationship being incredibly serious, and that she had become a born-again Christian after what had happened, and was still interested in pursuing a relationship with the man who killed her friend. They then played hours of footage of Chris and Tara, them talking about their relationship, Chris stating repeatedly he would do anything to be with her, and how much he hated his wife. At the end of the trial, the jury came back with a guilty verdict, obviously, and Chris was charged with the murder of his entire family, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for his relationship with Tara, it appears to be over. Chris spends his time in prison as a minister, just like his parents, and has recently been fighting to get his sentence overturned, stating that there wasn't enough direct evidence of his guilt. In 2019, he did this interview with True Crime Daily, where he tries to debunk the evidence.
Hello, this is Chris Holman.
So we spoke to him in this exclusive prison interview.
I want to get your version of events and what happened. If you could describe to me what your relationship with your wife was at the time of the murders.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually my relationship with my wife at the time of the murders was actually good. You know, it hurts me to say that I did, like so many other men do, fall into a different relationship and made some wrong choices with all of that.
Tara stated, and she told the jury, that you, on the day of the murders, were going to serve your wife with divorce papers.
Correct. That is what she stated, and, I have to, to be honest, that I was, deceiving her and was in the process of moving away from her, Tara, as far as in relationship.
Let's talk about the specific threats against you, because the police ultimately determined that those threatening emails that were being sent to you came from your very own laptop. Mm-hmm. How do you answer that? I mean, it makes it seem like you did it yourself.
I had two laptops. I, of course, did travel with both of them. The Dell laptop was used by my wife. It was left at the office. It was left in my car. Then it would make sense that that's the only opportunity that somebody had access to my laptop.
Chris is trying to imply that the threats being sent to the family were being sent by someone in his home, with the obvious implication it was Sherry. He's trying to make it appear that in order to spend more time with him, she was threatening the family's life, which would then lead to the obvious next question. So if it was Sherry, who was sending the threats? Did she beat herself up? And how did she manage to strangle herself? His story holds no water, but let's continue.
Coleman claims his own surveillance video he set up at his house showed a mystery man delivering one of those threats into his mailbox.
You can see a person on the camera with a hooded sweatshirt putting something in the mailbox, but you couldn't identify who it was because of the hooded sweatshirt.
And where is that video?
I don't have it. I came back home and from Hawaii, and asked Sherry about it, and we looked at it, and I seen the same thing she did, and I did not have a means at the time to download it to a DVR and record it.
But Chris, again, it's very hard to believe that the head of security for an international figure doesn't know how to download some surveillance video that could be crucial to someone threatening their family.
Oh, I'm not saying I didn't know how to do it. That's not the issue. I was still waiting for products and some part of the system to arrive.
Famed pathologist Dr. Michael Bodden concluded that Sherry and the kids were killed before 3 a.m. when Coleman would have been at home. But unbelievably, Coleman said Bodden got the science all wrong.
And you left the house before 6 that morning. So how could all of this have taken place without you not knowing about it?
As the body has deceased, it's at the body's normal temperature, and as it cools down to room temperature, the rate that it cools slows down. And so you find that window, and then you work backwards. If you actually use the slowest temperature that was recorded, it actually comes back to 5:47 in the morning is the time of decease.
5:47? And you left at 5:45?
Yes.
Wow, I mean, you're suggesting that that's like we've got a 2-minute window.
No, because nothing of that is what you call precise or exact.
This is clearly ridiculous, given that Chris is going against an expert in the field, and obviously he's an idiot. Chris's appeal was denied in 2020, and he remains in prison. Ron and Connie continue to declare his innocence, with Connie saying until someone can prove he did it, she will always believe her son. She passed away in June of 2020. As for Ron, he is active on Grace Ministries' Facebook page and still declares his son's innocence, despite all the evidence against. Chris hated his life with his family. He was resentful towards his wife and kids and believed that the only way out in which his infidelity wasn't made public was to kill his family. Sherry Ann, Garrett, and Gavin still had long lives ahead of them. They deserved to grow up and see what else the world had to offer them. But because Chris viewed them as an obstacle on his road to happiness, he felt justified in killing them. If you've made it to the end of this video, please consider leaving a like and a comment, as it does help us in the algorithm. If you have a case you would like to see us cover, please let us know in the comments down below, or by emailing us at dreading.official@gmail.com. Video production has slowed down a bit due to my health, but I will be working hastily to get the next video up on Patreon as soon as possible. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, stay safe.